I was hoping that I would not have to dignify the rants and raves of Mr. Johnson with a comment, but I think it is important, as you have rightly said, to deal with the allegations. Mr. Johnson is a pathological liar. And as I said earlier in my statement, if there are pathologies in all of these pronouncements and these testimonies, this commission has an obligation to search out the truth, and if lies are a result of a pathology, to seek treatment for those who have such pathologies. The interesting comments, or the interesting thing about the comments, is that there are witnesses. There are people whose names he called, and they're here, respectable people. David Vinton, Nat Petrie, both of them served under the interim government as governor and I think deputy governor of the bank. At no time did I take delivery of or in any way had any financial transaction with Mr. Johnson. Maybe I should take that back. Maybe we did have one financial transaction. When we changed the currency, we made worthless containers of money that were floating around here, perhaps containers that may have also been on his base. And I observe that from the moment we changed the currency and made useless those containers of resources, we incurred the anger, the rage, and the tendency to slander from some of those people who had amassed resources through looting. Now, regarding the individuals whose name he called as being accomplices, I should say, in all of this, I repeat, these people are here. I have the highest of regard for Governor Vinton. He came to that position highly recommended by people in the financial industry of this country. I think those people are respectable people. Vinton comes also with a wealth of experience, and I should tell you, he's a man of impeccable integrity. I'm very pleased that I had an opportunity to work with him. Madam Commissioner, I come from a background of people with integrity. I learned very early in my childhood, as much as I liked to be part of organizations, my parents taught me that in all my social organizational activities, to stay away from the money. I instilled that in my younger brothers. We all grew up in the highway, the YMCA, student politics. Never had we been treasurers, financial secretaries, and all of that. I've worked in positions at the University of Liberia, becoming dean and running a budget. Not a single day could anybody in administration or in the university tell you that there were questions of money and misappropriations that involved me. As served as chairman of the Constitution Commission, and in that position I ran a budget of more than $1 million. In a hostile environment, Mr. Doe had me audited, and the audit was with the intention of prosecuting me. He had the general audit go in and do an audit after a professional auditing firm had indeed audited those accounts. And I need not tell you that given the relationship I had with Samuel Doe and the fact that he found it necessary to lock me up in jail, if he had found one reason as a matter of financial impropriety, he would have thrown me in jail for stealing. He couldn't, try as he did. I was head of this interim government. It was not a social club. It was a government. There was a Ministry of Finance and a central bank. There were banks all around this place. Not a single day did I write a note to Governor Vinton or to anybody in financial management of this country to say, send me up this money or send me up that money. Even the contingency that was for the presidency to be used as discretionary funds, there were other people on my staff who handled this. And what did we do with it? Contributions to churches when they invite you, when some student comes and wants school fees paid and all of that. I never handled that. I didn't even know how much was in that account. You can ask the people who worked with me on this. You can check the records, because after the interim government, there were succeeding governments. Mr. Taylor came into Monrovia as part of a transitional government. It is no secret that we were not the best of friends. Mr. Taylor had oversight responsibility of the Ministry of Finance, if you recall. If Mr. Taylor for 1 minute, and the records were there, could have found one evidence that I had myself linked with improprieties in financial matters, he would have nailed me and he would have done it publicly. He couldn't, because not a single day did I have any contacts with the Ministry of Finance of a matter that was outside the public process. At one point he called in Liberian young business people, and he was trying then to say what a mess I had left behind, and what indeed they had discovered with respect to improprieties. And you know what he had to show them? A telephone bill to say that I had used $2,000 worth of telephone calls. One of those persons who indeed was familiar with LTC said to the I think it was Vice Chairman Dan Taylor, let me see that bill. On that bill were calls to Pakistan, to Cyprus, and all that. And this person said to him, well, I don't know. I don't think Dr. Sawyer has any connection with people in Pakistan and Cyprus. We know what the system was at that time. People were, putting, both in LTC and elsewhere, there were all kinds of shenanigans going on with respect to in-house stealing of telephone calls and that sort of thing. But even that as it may, if the only thing that Mr. Taylor could find was a telephone bill of $2,000, then I think that speaks to my record. Nobody, I defy anybody, and this is not only to those who come and testify here, but anybody, anywhere, to produce evidence of improprieties, stealing and pilfering of public funds attributed to me. I defy them. This is an open challenge. Open challenge to everybody, anywhere. I worked for 11 years at the University of Liberia. I hardly one day, 1 month, hardly, very seldom, did I take home a full paycheck. I signed deferment forms for students. Many of them can testify to this. Francis Johnson, who is I think he's now in the Foreign Ministry, Inspector General of Foreign Ministry, was our controller. He can attest to it. The records are there. The hundreds of deferred payments I had to pay over 11 years from my salary. It was not by accident or by bribery or whatever that when Doe threw me in jail, university students of all shades of opinion stood up in my defense. Not only because I provided sacrificial service of this financial quality, but I went to my job prepared. I gave them the best I had. And I treated everyone, without exception, in spite of ideological differences. I treated them fairly, and I appreciated a good logical argument, no matter what the persuasion of the student. And so that's my record. I left the university, and I went to the United States, and I got a job as a professor. God has been kind to me and my family, and so has this country. We receive fairly good education. My talents are marketable. I was hired by Indiana University, and I worked there. My family lived in Maryland. We lived in a townhouse. We paid collectively about $1,500 a month for the townhouse in rent. My brother is a medical doctor, well trained. He's in the United States. He's a urologist. Some of you may know him. He's done very well there. I have another brother who is an electrical engineer. He worked many years at LEC. And by the way, when I was in the interim government and he was at LEC, he did not hold the position of managing director. There's not one bone of nepotism in my body. He served in positions that he had worked his way into on merit until he left. So he's in the United States. He has a job as an electrical engineer, and he's doing well. I have sisters, and I have another brother who's an economist, and he is working as such. I have two sisters in the States. One is a public school teacher, one is a social worker. My wife and I were both employed in the United States. Together we make an income of more than $100,000. Indiana University records are there. They can be accessed if you think I'm lying about what I do there. Until I took this position, I was co-director of one of the most prestigious public policy institutes, not only at the university, but in the United States, highly ranked. I'm considered a governance expert. I, from time to time, am called upon as a consultant. I was the one who served as the reviewer, the expert to review South Africa's governance performance in the area of political governance. And I traveled down there on and off for several months doing this work. I get paid when I do such things by whomever indeed are the people who need the service. My consultancies from time to time involve the United Nations, ECOWAS, the ECA, the International Peace Institute, and a range of institutions. I have written 3 books, scores of articles on questions of governance, and in peer review journals, professional journals. I'm not saying these things to be boastful. But I think it's important to lay my background out to Liberians who do not know me and might be laboring under the impression that others would try to give them, that I come here with cup in hand, looking for looted goods, or I come here because I have no options. I have choices. But this country, that through its public educational system, I went to Kipamas High School. It's a public school. I started off first in Sinoe at the St. Joseph School, and today I help to raise money for that Catholic school. Got some foundation there. I went to the University of Liberia, and I graduated from the university. So most of my education was right here, from taxpayers' money. I feel an obligation to give something back. And that's why I come back home. And I want to be here. And because I have the options, if I cannot make the kind of living here, I can do the consultancies that I'm talking about. I command international rates in excess of $500 a day, excluding daily subsistence allowance. You can ask the UN people if you want. They come to me and they want me to do this stuff. But I do it when I can. I have a commitment here. Indiana University, when I told them I was leaving to come and work in my country for these purposes, gave me an extended leave with pay. You can write them and find out. They have me yet on their payroll. Not because they're full of cash, but they value my service there, and they value also the role that I play here. As those of you who know of American universities, they like this to be on the university record, that some of their faculty members are performing a service like this. They take this to their board of trustees. They take this to the supporters of the university, and they make millions of dollars on it. So it's an investment for them. So, Madam Member, I didn't want to go to this length. But I thought, please, I don't want anybody in the audience to think that this is a boastful man. My own style is one of modesty, low-key, and interacting with people, respecting them. But I don't think that should be mistaken. I don't think modesty should be mistaken, for trickery and deception and roguish tendencies. None of these have ever been in my past, and with God's help will never be in my future. At this point in time, we left the townhouse where we all contributed to paying $1,500 a month and secured a house. By the way, that townhouse, I should tell you, was photographed and put in the newspapers here by Goodrich. He published this paper called The Diaspora. And you know the American row of houses. He photographed the entire row and put it in the papers. My wife sued him in the American courts. And that case, maybe the statute of limitation may have passed now, but that case was called. And many of us had to prevail upon her to say, look, when you're in politics, your life should be an open book. You're in the kitchen, you must stand the heat. And so that was dropped. There was an occasion, well, of course, we moved from that townhouse into a single family dwelling, made a down payment of about $15,000. Anybody who is aware of the mortgage system in the United States know that you can own a home by making a down payment. You can buy a home of $250,000 perhaps by making a $5,000 down payment and paying mortgage regularly. We did that. We did that. And we bought this home in the United States. And I should tell you more. Since we bought that home, and since I have been at Indiana University since 2001, with an appreciable income, the fact that we had to move to Indiana mean we could not live in Maryland where this home is. So what did we do? We refinanced that home. Some of you may know what I'm talking about. You can go back to the mortgage company, and from the assets you would have accumulated by paying your mortgage and paying it on time, you can take some of that money out. And that's what we did. And we made a down payment on the home that we live in Bloomington, Indiana. And so for those who don't know it, I have two homes, not one, both of which we're paying mortgage on. The one in Maryland, we have it under lease. There's some people staying in there now. They are paying rent. We take that rent to pay the mortgage. The way the housing situation is bad now in the United States, we have to increase that with another $150 so that it fits the mortgage payment for the day. We intend at some point when we're coming home to sell the houses and bring whatever investments we have in it, whatever equity, and invest it here. The home that we have in Bloomington, we are accumulating equity in it. And I can tell you, we started to renovate our home here in Monrovia, in Caldwell, with, again, a refinancing. Two refinances we've had on our Maryland property to take some money and put it in a renovation of the house that we have in Caldwell. My life and my financial dealings, they are all open books. I have absolutely nothing to hide and absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. So, when a reporter from the Inquirer came to a press conference I was holding at the executive mansion, stood up and had his hands in his pocket, and I said to him, take your hands out of your pocket, and if you don't respect me, show some respect to this office. This man got enraged. He went on a US or something visit to the States, took this house picture, brought it and slammed it over the newspapers about the $600,000 house that I owned in the rich neighborhood with the Kennedys. Lies. The house is in Maryland, in a community called Germantown. For those of you who know the United States, you would know that this is a middle-class community. No flashy things. The neighbor we had was a retired police officer, a man who reached the rank of lieutenant in the police force. The other neighbor was a retired government employee of some kind. A third neighbor was a salesman. He traveled around the Beltway selling commodities.